In a different video where we talked about evicting a tenant, one of the things that I described is there's two reasons that you would evict. One is non-payment of rent, and the other is holding over beyond termination of the lease. Holding over when the lease expiration date is far down the road would be a result of a tenant being in default in some way. For instance, if the tenant brought in unauthorized pets or unauthorized roommates and you gave them the opportunity to cure, they did not get rid of the pets or the roommates, then you might say that, well, now that I've collected your April rent, I'm giving you till April 30th, but when you're still in the property May 1st, I'm going to start the eviction process because you're in default in the lease and I declared it in default and you have not cured the default. The challenge is that that's not always going to work for you in front of a judge. The one war story example, and it wasn't a property that we were managing, but an attorney that we've worked with for years was sharing that a landlord happened to own a 4-unit townhome building. It was not a quadruplex. He just happened to own all 4 units together. And he had one tenant that had been a problem tenant for a long time. In all likelihood, the person had a drinking problem. And what happened on this last straw was that the tenant came home, and if you can picture these townhomes, the 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-story with a drive-under garage. The tenant came home late one night, pulled into his drive-under garage, closed the garage door, went into the downstairs den area, fell down on the sofa and went to sleep, or passed out, however you want to look at that. The problem was about 2 hours later, the fire department is there taking everybody to the hospital because he forgot to turn his car off and everybody's suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. And in the owner's mind, that was the last straw. I'm going to get rid of this tenant. And he declared the tenant in default and filed the eviction action for holding over. But when it got in front of the judge's interpretation was, I don't see where you were financially harmed. And I don't see where this is something that's happened over and over again. This is a one-time event. And I'm not going to let you put this person out of their home when they're otherwise paying the rent. And you can't show me where it's cost you, the landlord, any money. And that's the sort of thing where a lot of rules in the lease might be violated by a tenant. And you might decide, I'm willing to actually evict the tenant over it. But this third party might be looking at it from a different perspective. So there is a rule, and this tenant is violating this rule, but Mr. and Ms. Landlord, show me where it's costing you money. And if you can't show me where it's costing you money, the judge may very well not agree to letting you evict the tenant. Now you've got to wait until the lease is over and not renew the lease, but that's the problem that you run into. Just because you want them out doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get them out. Well, a different factor to look at is, like the judge, how are you being harmed? If the tenant is otherwise taking care of the property and paying the rent, well, isn't that what you were looking to do, looking to accomplish the whole time? So why do I want to make a mountain out of a molehill? There's also a workaround that you can use related to the unauthorized pets. The market for a long time has gone away from pet deposits and pet fees and collected pet rent on tenants. If the lease that you're using has a built-in clause that says the pet rent is going to be blank dollars per month, then one of the things that you could do from an enforcement perspective is, when you discover that the tenant now has a pet on the property, and this is often what happens the first inspection after Christmas when somebody got puppies or kittens for a Christmas present, but whatever the circumstances, you go out and you find that now the tenant has a pet that was never requested, never approved, and they're not paying any pet rent. Well, if you've got the lease clause in place, what you can do is go back to the last time that you inspected the property and there was no pet and start charging them pet rent from that point forward. Either the tenant pays what they owe and keeps paying it, and now you're at least collecting some money to cover what might or might not be pet damage when the tenants vacate the property, or you can use it as leverage to negotiate with the tenant so that per the lease you owe this much money because of these pets. That may or may not fix your issue related to the pets. It's not going to fix your issue related to the unauthorized roommates. And we're back to somebody rented the property, they're taking care of the property, they're paying the rent on time, they meet somebody, and this somebody moves in, and your tenant doesn't want to add them to the lease because it's still a new relationship. And if I add this person to the lease, then I may have a very difficult time breaking up with this person. So understand that there are some sometimes valid reasons why your tenant doesn't want to add additional occupants to the lease, at least not initially. It is something that you might decide you want to deal with at lease renewal, but again, it costs a lot of money to turn a property and to re-rent it. So if you've got more than one or two adults that were on the original application in the property, and the property is not suffering any harm, and you're still getting your rent, let that sleeping dog lie. Your idea or your goal is to maximize your return on investment, and keeping tenants that are paying rent and taking care of the property in the property for a long time is the best way to do that.